We bring modern expectations to ancient documents. We expect a historical record to hold up against the precision of a laser scan. We equate absolute truth with mathematical equations. In the modern mind, accuracy requires decimal points, rigid formatting, and clinical exactness. This creates a reading crisis. When a modern reader opens an ancient text and finds a rounded number, a loose approximation, or awkward grammar, they immediately flag it as a factual error. To construct a historically accurate framework for reading ancient texts, we have to divorce our modern demand for pedantic exactness from the actual substance of truthfulness. The theological baseline for biblical inerrancy starts with a simple deductive premise. God cannot lie or speak falsely. His speech serves as the ultimate metric for truth. That brings us to the formal, rigorous definition of biblical inerrancy regarding the original manuscripts. This text states the parameters clearly. The inerrancy of Scripture means that Scripture in the original manuscripts does not affirm anything that is contrary to fact. Notice the strict boundaries of this definition. It governs truthfulness in factual claims. It does not demand a certain degree of linguistic polish or mathematical precision. It simply states the text will not affirm anything contrary to fact. Affirming nothing contrary to fact. That is the rigid filter we will now use to stress test the apparent errors found in the biblical text. The first test examines how the Bible describes the natural world. It relies heavily on ordinary, phenomenological language. From the perspective of a speaker on earth, the sun rises and the rain falls. It would be hopelessly pedantic to demand that everyday communication calculate gravity vectors to explain moisture moving toward the Earth's surface. We say rain falls downward, and that is a true description of the observed phenomena. This logic applies directly to numerical reporting. A reporter can state that 8,000 soldiers died in a battle without implying a literal, exact count of 7,999 or 8,001. This diagram shows the spectrum of acceptable precision. On one side, we have a rough approximation of a route labeled as 1 mile. On the other side, a technical grid calculates the exact same route at 1.287 miles. Both statements about distance are completely true. The vague approximation is just as inerrant as the technical calculation, because neither affirms anything contrary to fact. The core rule of measurement is contextual. The limits of truthfulness depend entirely on the degree of precision implied by the speaker and expected by the original ancient audience. Judging ancient conversational statements by the standards of modern scientific instruments forces an anachronistic metric onto the text. It creates a false standard of error where none exists. The second stress test deals with quotations. Modern readers assume that quoting someone requires an exact verbatim transcript of their spoken words. In contemporary Western culture, we rely on quotation marks. Those symbols act as a binding contract guaranteeing word-for-word accuracy. This excerpt reveals a major historical constraint. Written Greek in the 1st century lacked quotation marks and equivalent punctuation. An accurate citation only required a correct representation of the content. Ancient quotation functions similarly to our modern indirect quotes. You did not need to replicate the exact syllables. You only needed to report the accurate substance of what was spoken. When we see variations across the Gospels in how they quote Jesus, or when New Testament writers loosely cite the Old Testament, they're operating perfectly within this cultural standard of substantive accuracy. Providing an accurate representation of a speaker's meaning is entirely inerrant. Demanding strict verbatim transcripts from 1st century documents is a historically illiterate approach to the text. The final stress test confronts the actual mechanics of the language itself. The presence of grammatical irregularities and syntactical failures in the original Hebrew and Greek. We find instances of plural verbs paired with singular subjects, or feminine adjectives used where masculine ones are expected. These stylistically rough and ungrammatical statements are not evenly distributed. They are heavily concentrated in specific writings, like the Book of Revelation. To understand why this doesn't violate inerrancy, look at this visual analogy. On the left, a sophisticated, well-educated speaker flawlessly delivers a lie. On the right, a rough, weather-beaten worker plainly states the truth. A person with poor, uneducated grammar can be completely trusted if they have earned a reputation for never telling a lie. The biblical text operates the exact same way. A statement can completely fail the standard rules of proper grammar while remaining entirely factually true. Truthfulness in speech is an independent variable from syntactical perfection. Grammar is merely the vehicle of style. Truth is the actual cargo. This brings us to a major contemporary theological challenge: the attempt to restrict inerrancy solely to matters of faith and practice. This position asserts the Bible is authoritative when instructing us on religious beliefs and ethical conduct. However, it allows for the possibility of false statements in areas considered peripheral, like minor historical details or scientific facts. This timeline tracks a specific semantic shift in the United States. Prior to 1960, theologians used the terms infallible and inerrant interchangeably. But between 1960 and 1965, the two concepts diverged sharply. The word infallible was actively weakened to mean only that the Bible will not lead us astray in matters of faith, stripping away the requirement for total factual accuracy. This footnote documents the exact academic framework that promoted the change, tracking how the definition of infallibility was diluted. This artificial division is an attempt by modern theologians to save the Bible's spiritual authority while simultaneously surrendering its historical reliability. The definitive rebuttal to this compromise is found within the text itself. The Bible makes absolutely no restriction on the kinds of subjects to which it speaks truthfully. As this text details, the New Testament authors trusted the smallest historical events of the Old Testament narrative. For example, Paul relies on minor details, like people sitting down to eat and drink, to make massive theological points. The original authors show zero intention of carving out faith and practice as a distinct, recognizable category of truth separate from historical fact. Theology and history form an unbroken chain. If you dismantle the factual history of the events, you inherently dismantle the theology built upon them. The text's internal claims about its own factual perfection remain absolutely unyielding against all forms of modern criticism. The doctrine of inerrancy demands that we accept the Bible as completely factually true in all it intends to affirm, elegantly communicated through the authentic, varied, and perfectly imprecise language of human history.